I recently faced my own worst nightmare. The HOA president's son and his buddy strung up my daughter from our oak after months of warnings. And his excuse, he called it teen hazing. Little did they know, I wasn't just her dad. I was a seal with receipts. Let me start at the beginning. Before we start, let us know where you're listening from today. The threat wasn't in the wind. It was tacked to my gate. The first thing that caught my eye that morning was the chill in the air, sharp and carrying the scent of moist soil and evergreens, just like a proper Virginia dawn ought to. But this chill was different. It arrived on a sheet of paper, rigid and formal, pinned to the primary entrance of our property. I spotted it through the kitchen window, a pale square standing out against the shadowed timber, reflecting the early light of sunrise. My coffee was still percolating, its rich aroma struggling against the uneasy sensation rising in my gut. I'd served as a Navy SEAL for 2 decades. You develop an instinct for that sensation. It signals danger lurking even if it's not visible. I slipped into my boots, ignoring the ties, and stepped out over the dewy lawn. The note was secured by a lone, gleaming brass pin, driven firmly into the gate. It came from the Sterling Meadows Homeowners Association, a penalty of $100. The infraction, unkempt farming perimeter next to a suburban vista. That was their polished term for claiming my boundary wasn't attractive enough for their tastes. I yanked the sheet free, the pin pulling out along with it. The printing was still slightly wet. This hadn't been posted. It was placed personally under cover of night, a deliberate signal. I gazed over the street toward Sterling Meadows. A cluster of oversized homes coated in various tones of neutral, each boasting a yard so immaculate it resembled a slab of emerald pavement. It was an entirely separate realm from my 500 acres of undulating fields and dense woodland, ground that had belonged to my wife's kin for generations. After her death, this land was the last piece of her I held on to, aside from our girl, June, and I refused to surrender it. We'd been established here far longer. These residences were recent arrivals, a blight expanding from urban sprawl. And their leader was a guy called Hal Barlow, the HOA head, a builder who viewed my farm not as a residence, but as the next stage in his expansive vision. He was the type who grinned with every tooth exposed, but no warmth in his gaze. The penalty wasn't really about the cash. It was about applying force. This marked the 10th in half a year. During that same period, the Sterling crowd had made a game of targeting my child. Graffiti on her locker, a punctured tire, a fabricated story spread digitally, a push near the bus. We'd submitted a couple of complaints to the school. The cautions led nowhere. I'd captured one push on my device at the stop just days ago and kept the recording. Overgrown weeds, a corroded latch on a side entrance, the noise of my machinery firing up prior to 8 a.m. Every citation was a small prod, a signal that they were monitoring, that they deemed my place an ugly obstruction to their valued scenery. I balled up the document in my hand. They sought a battle of endurance. They aimed to drain me through legal fees and charges until I had no choice but to sell off. What they failed to grasp was that I excelled at endurance. It's a contest of waiting, vigilance, and timing the right intensification. Hal Barlow fancied himself a hunter. He was merely a thug in leisure attire. He had no clue what an actual hunter resembled. I returned indoors and drained my mug, positioned at the counter gazing out toward the ancient oak on the hill that defined our boundary. It was a colossus, a beacon for the entire area. It also happened to be the precise location Barlow's attorneys repeatedly sought access to, a bypass for his intended roadway. Such a path would net him fortunes. I'd rejected them repeatedly. My wife and I had etched our names into that bark as youngsters. June once swung from a tire on one of its lower limbs. That tree was as integral to my kin as the dwelling itself. Barlow regarded it as a barrier, a nuisance. That's the lens through which men like him view existence. Anything not advancing their goals is simply an item to eliminate. Later that day, right on schedule, Barlow's vehicle, a sleek black European luxury model perpetually spotless, rolled up to my entrance. He emerged in a light-colored polo and creased trousers, appearing ready for a round of golf. His boy Sterling occupied the front seat. Sterling mirrored his old man, only bulkier and more impatient. 17, star player at Ashern High, sharing a class with June. His quartet of pals weren't present. Separate vehicle, separate time, but the outerwear aligned. He remained seated, fixated on his device, the epitome of indifferent conceit. Hal approached the barrier, hands planted on his sides, appraising my land as if it were already his. "Done," he uttered, his tone slick as lubricant. "Received my alert, I gather." "I did, Hal," I replied, staying put on my veranda. "Merely procedure, you get it?" He continued, displaying that hollow grin. "The committee enforces guidelines. We must uphold a specific quality for the neighborhood. This isn't your neighborhood," I countered. "This is my land. Your neighborhood stops at the pavement." His grin stiffened slightly. "Listen, Don, no need for hostility. I've extended a fair proposal. Beyond fair. You could acquire a fresh spot, something easier to handle. No barriers to repair, no pastures to trim. Not parting with it," I stated. The response was blunt, conclusive. He exhaled dramatically, feigning regret. Pity. This terrain holds such promise. Squandered, truly. And it's a harsh spot to bring up a teen girl, right? Isolated out here. Incidents occur. He shot a look back at the car where Sterling now observed us. A smug expression on his mug. It wasn't an inquiry. It was a veiled, oily menace directed at the sole thing that truly counted to me. My experience activated. The facet of me that evaluates the environment in terms of positions and risks. He was signaling his strike. He was indicating his target. He was simply too conceited to believe I'd counter it. "You and your kid keep to your side of the barrier, Hal," I said. My tone didn't rise. It dropped, grew icier. "Stay well clear of my girl." He merely laughed, raised his palms in fake capitulation, and retreated to his ride. As they departed, Sterling set down his device, locked eyes with me, and drew a digit across his neck. It was juvenile. It was also a vow, and I recognized I needed to treat it gravely. Guys like Hal are spineless. They employ stand-ins. Recently, that stand-in sported a varsity coat in my daughter's classroom on his timetable. They believed regulations and attorneys granted them power, but they were feeble, decayed inside. They didn't comprehend the code I follow. That evening, I headed to my shed. It's an aged structure packed with equipment for repairing machinery and fixing enclosures. But in a secured metal locker, I store a separate array of items from my former existence. I retrieved a compact all-weather scouting device. It was top tier, equipped with movement detection, infrared capability, and a noiseless, sharp focus mechanism. Extended power supply, no illumination, no sound. Then I blended into the foliage. I hiked to the crest by the venerable oak. I selected a position on the bole roughly 20 feet high, concealed amid limbs, and fastened it securely. I adjusted the view precisely. It encompassed the tree's base, the perimeter both ways, and a broad stretch of the entry path from Sterling Meadows. Any intruder from that angle would be captured. Barlow's offspring had tampered with my outbuilding monitors the prior week. That's why I installed this concealed unit. 7 days back, my outbuilding feed revealed a shifted perspective. Someone had adjusted it. Sterling's visage appeared in the workshop pane's glare. Clear identification with timing and everything, precise, irrefutable. I activated it and descended. The forest was still. The unit was undetectable. I sensed that icy knot in my stomach ease a bit. I wasn't merely anticipating their action now. I was observing. I was prepared. The pieces were in place. And I knew with a bone-deep surety that Hal Barlow had just committed the gravest error of his existence. He believed he was warning me of his danger, but he'd only jogged my memory of my true nature. June arrived home from classes a short while after, her pickup rumbling along the extended pebble path. She was 16, yet she possessed her mom's timeless spirit, intelligent, reliable, and more resilient than she appeared. She was aware of the HOA's harassment. We kept no secrets in our household. She entered the cooking area, tossed her bag to the ground, and snatched a fruit from the dish. She'd noticed Barlow's vehicle. Did Mr. Barlow drop by to appreciate our genuine countryside appeal once more? She inquired, her words dripping with the wry irony she'd gotten from me. I informed her of the penalty, of the subtle warning. I omitted Sterling's motion. No reason to inject that venom into her thoughts, but I did mention the monitoring device. She simply bobbed her head, her mouth set firm. She got it. She'd been raised on my tails, the cleaned-up ones at least. She understood vigilance. She knew about readying the terrain. Good, was her sole reply. Then she regarded me. Take care, Dad. I spotted the concern in her gaze, the identical expression her mother offered before I shipped out. It was the one thing that could still frighten me. I was cautious. I was perpetually cautious. But I was beginning to realize caution might not suffice. Not in this instance. This time the conflict had reached my threshold. And I harbored a dreadful premonition that before it concluded, I'd need to demonstrate to Hal Barlow and his privileged offspring precisely what transpires when you menace a man with nothing remaining to forfeit except his offspring. The day it occurred began like any typical one. A brisk, bright fall afternoon. I was in the western field repairing a portion of fencing that a black bear had chosen to redesign overnight. It was routine labor, pulling the strands, driving the fasteners, the sort that allows your thoughts to drift. I was pondering the cold season, about storing the final bales, about the steady cadence of rural life. June was due back from lessons. She typically followed the path winding through the timber from the drop-off, a quicker route she'd taken since childhood. It beat the primary lane. She'd generally be inside by 4, her tunes blasting too high, the aroma of her chosen treat wafting through the space. It was 4:30. I glanced at my timepiece. No tunes yet, no June. I attempted not to fret. Teens get held up. A buddy, an assignment, a deflated wheel. Countless ordinary explanations, but that frigid intuition returned, twisting inside. I gathered my gear and made for the residence. The quiet felt off. It seemed dense, stifling. I dialed her cell. It rang directly to messages, unusual for her. She always picked up. I entered the home. Her satchel sat by the entrance, exactly where she left it. But that was the lone trace. The place was vacant. I moved through each area, my steps resounding on the aged planks. Empty. I stepped out again and surveyed the forest's border. The route she used surfaced close to the ancient oak on the hill. My focus fixed there. I didn't yet know what had transpired, not definitively. But afterward, reviewing the recording from the scout cam, I witnessed everything. The scenes were seared into my memory, a mute, textured sequence repeating in icy fury. The device triggered at 3:58 p.m. June emerges. The attack crests at 4:02. June striding from the trees, her earpieces in, absorbed in her thoughts. Then from the opposite side of the barrier, originating from Sterling Meadows, 5 shapes in Ashern high gear, prominent embroidered digits. Sterling Barlow led the group naturally. His companions, a band of smirking scavengers, spread out trailing him. They leaped the fence as if it were play. June noticed them. She halted, removed her earpieces. I could observe her posture shift in the clip. She didn't shrink. They'd tried to corner her here last week at dusk. She walked away. He didn't like that. Sterling said something. I couldn't hear the words on the silent footage, but I could see the sneer on his face. He was enjoying this. He was the king of his little world, and he was here to deliver a message from his father. One of his friends, a big kid built like a linebacker, grabbed her arm. June tried to pull away, her movements sharp and efficient. She almost got free, but there were too many of them. They swarmed her. Sterling tossed the zip ties. He'd brought them. 2 of them held her arms, while a third zip tied her wrists behind her back. She fought. She kicked. It didn't matter. They were stronger, and they were caught up in the mob mentality, laughing and shoving. The footage was nauseatingly clear. Sterling pulled out his phone and started filming. He walked around her, circling like a shark, his face a mask of smug superiority. He was narrating for his audience for the video he probably planned to post online to humiliate her, to humiliate me, to show everyone that the Marovs could be broken. Then they dragged her toward the big oak. One of them threw a thick rope over a low, heavy branch, the same branch that used to hold her tire swing. They fashioned a crude noose and slipped it over her head. It wasn't tight. It wasn't meant to kill her. Not right away. It was meant to terrorize, to leave a mark. They lifted her up just enough so her toes were barely scraping the ground, the rope taking her weight. Then came the moment that turned my blood to ice. Sterling stepped in close. His phone held right up to her face. I could read his lips on the screen. The words were a perfect match for the ones his friend would later repeat to the sheriff's deputy. In his statement, Caleb wrote it word for word. He grinned a wide predatory grin and said, "Your daddy's some big bad seal, right? Where is he now? Superman going to fly in and save you?" He and his friends laughed. A chorus of cruel, stupid sounds. Then they just left her there. They vaulted back over the fence and disappeared, jogging back toward their perfect beige houses, leaving my daughter hanging from a tree on her own land. The video showed June alone, her body twisting slightly. For a moment there was panic in her eyes. I saw it, the pure animal fear. Then I saw something else. I saw her training kick in. The things I had taught her, not for a situation like this, not for something so monstrous, but for life. For dealing with stress, with fear. Her eyes closed, her body stilled. Her chest rose and fell in a slow, measured rhythm. 4 seconds in, hold for 7, 8 seconds out. Her steady breath. A tool to calm the nervous system, to force oxygen to the brain, to keep the panic from taking over. She was staying in control. She was saving her energy. She was thinking. Then I saw her left hand, the one with the watch I'd given her for her 16th birthday. It was a simple digital watch, but it had one special feature. I saw her fingers, clumsy from the angle and the zip ties, start to tap the side of the watch. Tap, 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 pause. Tap, 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 pause. Tap, tap, tap. A simple repeating pattern. SOSA. Silent, desperate signal being sent out into the world. A signal that at that moment I was completely unaware of. I was still back at the house, my own panic rising, calling her name into the silent woods. The trail cam footage ended a few minutes later, the file saved, the lens waiting patiently for the next movement. The camera had done its job. It had been my eyes. It had recorded the truth. But it couldn't help her. And as I stood there by the empty house, a terrible dread settling over me, I knew that June was in trouble. The kind of trouble that fines and lawyers couldn't fix. The kind of trouble that demanded a response they couldn't possibly imagine. I grabbed the keys to my truck and was about to tear down the drive when my brain finally caught up with my instincts. Driving was too slow. The roads wound around the hills. The fastest way to the ridge to that oak tree was a straight line. But a man on foot is still just a man on foot. I needed a better vantage point. It needed to see what I was running toward. My mind raced through the assets I had. Truck, tractor, and the helicopter. After I left the Navy, I started a small charter service, flying tourists over the Blue Ridge Mountains. It was quiet, it was peaceful. My Bell 206, a reliable old workhorse, was sitting in the hangar behind the barn. It was the fastest way to get eyes on the entire property. The decision was instant. I sprinted for the hangar. While I was getting the helicopter ready, my phone still dead in my hand, I kept trying to rationalize. Maybe she was fine. Maybe this was all in my head. But the feeling, that cold certainty, wouldn't go away. This was Hal Barlow. This was his smug, vicious son. This was the escalation he had promised. He had threatened my daughter, and I had been a fool to think he would stick to paperwork. The world of contracts and bylaws was his battlefield, but he had just moved the conflict to mine, and on my battlefield the rules were very, very different. I just hoped to God I wasn't already too late. The cell service on our farm is a joke. It's one of the things I love about it. The rolling hills and thick woods created dead zones that technology can't seem to penetrate. It's a forced disconnection from the noise of the world. But right now, it was a curse. My phone was a useless brick. No bars, no signal, no way to call for help, no way to find June with a simple location ping. The panic I'd been suppressing started to bubble up, hot and acidic. I slammed the phone down on the counter, useless. I had to rely on older methods. I had to rely on myself. I ran outside and yelled her name until my throat was raw. The only answer was the wind rustling through the autumn leaves. It was a lonely mocking sound. I was alone, cut off. This was their plan. I realized they knew about the dead zones. Sterling and his friends lived just across the way. They knew exactly where you could and couldn't get a signal. They had isolated her. They had isolated me. It was a simple but effective tactical choice. It meant that by the time I figured out something was wrong, and by the time I could get to a place to call for help, precious minutes, maybe hours would have passed. It was a well-designed trap. But they didn't know everything about us. They didn't know about the games we used to play when June was little. Games that were really training exercises disguised as fun. We had a system, a backup for when technology failed. It was a whistle. A small, flat, two-chambered survival whistle I wore on a cord around my neck. It produced two distinct high-pitched notes at once, a discordant sound that could cut through dense woods and carry for miles. We had signals. One long blast meant come home. A series of short blasts meant I need help, but I'm okay. And then there was the two-note signal, a high note followed immediately by a low note. Over and over, it was the signal for extreme danger. It meant I am in trouble and I cannot get to you. We had practiced it, but I never ever thought she would have to use it. And then I heard it faint but unmistakable high, then low. A desperate, piercing shriek carried on the wind from the direction of the ridge. It wasn't June's whistle. It couldn't be. They had her. But someone was blowing that signal. My blood ran cold. Who was it? Who was out there? Who had found her? My mind raced through the possibilities. A hiker? A hunter? Then I realized who it had to be. Neighbor Finley. Finley was a rancher whose property bordered mine to the north. He was a man of about 70, tough as old leather with eyes that saw everything. He spent most of his days on horseback checking on his cattle, which often grazed right up to my fence line. He and I didn't talk much, but there was a mutual respect, the kind of respect that exists between men who understand the land. He would have recognized the sound of those kids. He would have known something was wrong. The whistle sounded again. High, low, a frantic, urgent rhythm. He wasn't just signaling, he was relaying. June must have used her own whistle, one she kept in her backpack before they took it from her. Or maybe she had just screamed. Finley had heard it, investigated, and seen the situation. He couldn't get to her because of the fence and the steep ravine on his side. And he knew my phone was useless. So he was using our code, blowing the signal from his side of the ridge, hoping I would hear it. He was my relay, my lifeline. Just as that realization hit, the landline in the kitchen started ringing, a shrill, old-fashioned jangle that cut through the silence. I sprinted back inside and snatched the receiver off the hook. "Maroff!" I barked. "Dawn, it's Finley." His voice was growly, strained. There was no preamble, no small talk. "You need to get up to the big oak now." "What is it? What's happening?" I demanded, though I already knew. "Your girl, June, she's up in the tree, strung up. It's that Barlow kid and his pack of thugs. I saw them run off a few minutes ago. They left her there." Every word was a hammer blow. Strung up. Left her there. The images my mind conjured were 1,000 times worse than the grainy trail cam footage I would later see. "Is she moving?" I asked, my voice tight. Clinical. I had to be an operator now, not a father. Emotion was a liability. "A little," Finley said. "But not for long, I figure. The branch is low, but she's hanging, Don. She's hanging." He paused. "I called the sheriff, but they're coming from town. 20 minutes at least." "You don't have 20 minutes. He was right. I didn't have 20 minutes. I might not have 5. "I'm on my way," I said, and hung up the phone. The trap was sprung. The clock was ticking. The rage I felt was a pure white-hot thing, but I packed it down deep inside. Rage makes you sloppy. I couldn't afford sloppy. I needed to be cold, fast, and efficient. I grabbed my fixed blade knife from the kitchen drawer, the one I used for cutting hay bales, and slid it into my belt. Then he ran for the hangar, my mind a clear, cold void. All I could think about was the geometry of the problem, the distance, the time, the objective. Get to June. Everything else was just noise. The game was on, and I was coming. I was coming fast. The roar of the Bell 206 turbine engine filled the hangar. A familiar, comforting sound that focused my mind. The pre-flight check was automatic. A series of muscle memory movements I could do in my sleep. Fuel, hydraulics, controls. Everything was green. In less than 2 minutes from reaching the hangar, I was lifting off, the skids rising from the concrete floor, kicking up a storm of dust and loose leaves. I climbed fast, banking hard toward the ridge. From the air, my farm spread out below me, a patchwork of gold and brown fields and deep green forest. It looked so peaceful, a postcard. But I knew that down there, in the shadow of that giant oak, a horror was unfolding. I crested the first hill, and the ridge came into view. Same jackets, same voices from the bus stop video I saved. Pattern confirmed. Same bully, same crew, same spot they tried last week. It was about to get worse. I saw it immediately. A small figure dangling from a low branch. June. Even from a distance of half a mile, I could see the unnatural stillness of her form. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic trapped bird. I pushed the cyclic forward, urging the helicopter faster, the engine whining in protest. It needed to get closer to assess the situation, but I couldn't just land there. The ground around the tree was uneven, sloped, and covered in rocks. A safe landing was impossible. Slope, rocks, rotor wash, bad math. More importantly, the noise in the rotor wash from a close approach would draw attention. It would announce my arrival. I needed the element of surprise, so I made a decision. I would use the flyby as a decoy. I flew directly over the tree, high enough not to be a direct threat, but low enough to be unmissable. It was a show of force. No safe LZ. Use the noise to cover my sprint. On the next pass, my cockpit cam catches the scene. A loud screaming declaration that I was here. I wanted them to think I was trapped in the air, that my only option was to circle and watch, helpless. If Sterling and his friends were still nearby, watching their handiwork, the helicopter would fix their attention on the sky. It would make them look up, not down at the fence line. It was a gamble, but it was the only play I had. As I passed over, I got a clear look. The rope wasn't around her neck in a way that would kill quickly. It was high under her jaw, designed to slowly strangle as her strength gave out. Herbity was limp. I couldn't tell if she was conscious. A new, colder wave of fury washed over me. This wasn't just a threat. This was a clumsy, arrogant attempt at murder, orchestrated by a child who'd watched too many movies. I banked the helicopter away, flying a wide, slow circle out over the valley, making it look like I was searching for a place to land or waiting for the sheriff. But my eyes were memorizing the terrain below. I picked my spot. A small flat clearing about 300 YD down the fence line, hidden from the oak tree by a dense stand of pine. I brought the helicopter down fast, a controlled crash that barely gave the skids time to settle. I didn't shut the engine down. I couldn't spare the time for a restart. I put it in idle, the rotor still turning slowly, providing a blanket of ambient noise. I jumped out, the knife already in my hand, and sprinted. The 300 YD felt like 3 miles. My lungs burned, my legs ached. I wasn't a 25-year-old Sannymore, but the adrenaline, the pure uncut rage fueled me. I cleared the treen and saw the oak. She was still there, still hanging. No one else was around. The decoy had worked. I slowed my approach for the last 50 yards, my breathing controlled, my footsteps silent. Back to basics. Move with purpose. I came up behind the massive trunk of the tree. I could hear her now, a faint, ragged gasping. She was alive, conscious. I peered around the edge of the trunk. Her face was pale, her lips turning blue, but her eyes were open and they were looking right at me. There was no relief in them, no tears, just a steady, focused calm. She was doing the breathing 4-7-8. Even now, my daughter was a warrior. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. I moved to the rope. It was a thick, cheap nylon rope, the kind you buy at a hardware store. It was looped over the branch and tied off with a fat knot around the trunk. A kid's work. I didn't bother with the knots. I reached up with my knife, the blade razor sharp, and sliced through the rope just above her head. One clean cut. I caught her as she fell. She was lighter than I expected, a dead weight in my arms. I lowered her to the ground, my hands shaking now that the immediate danger was over. I laid her down gently and immediately cut the zip ties on her wrists. Her hands were swollen and red. I checked her airway. It was constricted but clear. I looked at my watch from my flyby to the cut. 47 seconds. It felt like a lifetime. June coughed, a deep rattling sound, and then started breathing. Really breathing, sucking in the cool air in great greedy gulps. Her eyes never left my face. "Hey, kiddo," I whispered, my voice cracking. "Hey, Dad," she rasped, her own voice barely audible. "Took you long enough?" A weak smile touched her lips, dark humor. She got that from me, too. I pulled her into a hug, burying my face in her hair. The smell of wood smoke and autumn leaves filling my senses. Therage was still there, a cold, hard stone in my chest. But now it had a purpose. It was a fuel. We weren't victims. We weren't going to scream or cry or run. We were going to do what we always did. We were going to collect the receipts. We were going to make them pay. Not with fists, not with violence, but with cold, hard, undeniable proof. The fight wasn't over. It had just begun. We didn't wait for the sheriff at the tree. That was their crime scene, not ours. I helped June to her feet. She was shaky, bruised, but unbroken. We walked back to the helicopter. The silence between us filled with a grim understanding. This was a new chapter. The world had shown its ugly face, and we were going to face it together. Back at the house, the first thing I did was get June a glass of water and check her over more carefully. The rope had left a raw red line across her throat, a brutal necklace of violence. The marks from the zip ties on her wrists were already starting to bruise, ugly purple welts against her pale skin. I took photos of everything, close-ups, wide shots, documenting the damage with the detached precision of a crime scene photographer. Each click of the camera was a piece of evidence. Each photo was a nail for their coffin. While June sat at the kitchen table, wrapped in a blanket and sipping her water, I went to my office and pulled the SD card from the trail camera. I slid it into my computer, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm. I double-clicked the file, and there it was. The whole thing playing out in silent, high-defined clarity. The ambush, the assault. Sterling's smug, jeering face filling the frame. His friends, their expressions, a mix of excitement and mob-fueled stupidity. I saw the rope. He saw the zip ties. And most importantly, I saw the timestamp in the corner of the screen. 4:02 p.m., it lined up perfectly with Finley's call, with my flight time, with everything. It was a digital witness that couldn't be bribed or intimidated. It told the whole story. I saved a copy. Then I saved 3 more on different drives and uploaded one to a secure cloud server. Evidence, like anything else, needs redundancy. Next, we went to the oak tree. I moved carefully, methodically. I found the cut end of the rope I had left behind. I bagged it. I photographed the knot still on the trunk. I took fiber samples from the bark of the tree where the rope had been rubbing. I took pictures of the footprints on the ground. I was building a case, a simple, clear, and utterly damning narrative of what had happened. It was a montage of malice. The trail cam clip showing the faces and the act. The photographs of June's injuries showing the result. The rope fibers linking the tool to the scene. The zip ties, which I had also bagged, proving premeditation. They hadn't just found those in the woods. They had brought them. When I came back inside, June was looking at the pictures on my camera screen. Her face was a mask of cold fury. "They filmed it," she said, her voice a low growl. "Sterling, he had his phone out the whole time." "I know," I said. He was narrating. "He wanted to post it," she said. "He wanted everyone at school to see it." The humiliation was as much a part of the weapon as the rope. To them, her dignity was just another thing to be taken. It made the rage in my chest burn even hotter, but I kept my voice steady. "That phone is now the single most important piece of evidence in this case," I told her. "The video on it, the texts, the call logs, it's a treasure trove, and they're too arrogant to think they need to delete it." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of it all settling in the quiet kitchen. We had the what, the when, the where, and the who. The evidence was overwhelming, but there was still a missing piece. The why. I knew the big picture why, how Barlow wanted my land. But this act was so extreme, so reckless. Was this just Sterling and his friends being monstrous bullies? Or was it something more? Was it directed? The threat Hal had made that morning echoed in my head. Things can happen. It felt too coordinated to be a random act of teenage cruelty. I needed a link. A direct, unbreakable chain from the boy sat the tree to the man in the big house across the road. I looked at the footage again, this time ignoring Sterling. It focused on the other boys, the pack. Most of them were just followers, their faces alike with the thrill of belonging, of being on the winning team. But one of them, a lanky kid named Caleb, looked different. In the background of one shot, while Sterling was taunting June, I could see Caleb looking away, his expression uneasy. He wasn't laughing. He was watching the woods like he was afraid of being seen. He was the weak link. I knew his family. His father was a decent man, a doctor. They were new to the area, probably dazzled by the Barlows' money and influence. Caleb was impressionable, and right now he was probably terrified. He had participated in an attempted murder, and he had to know on some level how much trouble he was in. He was our way-in. I looked at June. "I need to go out for a little while," I said. "Stay here, lock the doors. Don't answer for anyone but me or the sheriff." She just nodded, her eyes hard. "Go," she said. "Get him." I knew exactly what she meant. She didn't mean Caleb. She meant the man who had started it all. The man who had sicked his dog on my daughter. I was going to find the link. I was going to pull on that thread until the whole rotten tapestry unraveled. And Caleb, the scared L-looking boy in the background of the video, was going to be my first stitch. Finding Caleb was easy. I knew where he lived. One of the newer, bigger houses in Sterling Meadows, a monument to beige conformity. I didn't go to his front door. That would be too confrontational. It would put him on the defensive. I parked down the street and waited. An hour later, I saw him come out the back door heading for the detached garage. He was alone. I got out of my truck and walked across the perfectly manicured lawn, my boots feeling out of place on the lush green carpet. I intercepted him halfway to the garage. "Caleb," I said. My voice was quiet, conversational. He jumped, startled, and spun around. When he saw me, the color drained from his face. He looked like he was going to be sick. Heck knew who I was. He knew why I was there. "Mr. Marov," he stammered. "I don't know anything." "I think you do," I said, keeping my voice level. "I have a video, Caleb, from a camera on my property. It's very clear. It shows you. It shows everyone." I let that sink in. I watched the panic flicker in his eyes. He was just a boy. A stupid, scared boy who had gotten in way over his head. He was a follower, not a leader. And followers are always the first to break. "It was just a prank," he whispered, the words sounding hollow, even to him. It was Sterling's idea. "We didn't mean for it to go that far. You put a rope around my daughter's neck and left her hanging from a tree," I said, the words as cold and hard as river stones. "Where did you think it was going?" "You held her arms, Caleb. The video shows you holding her arms while another boy put zip ties on her. That's not a prank. That's kidnapping and assault at a minimum." I wasn't a cop, but I knew the language. I saw him flinch at the words kidnapping, assault. They were real. They had consequences. "I didn't want to," he said, his voice cracking. "Sterling said we had to. He said his dad wanted to send a message." There it was. The link. "His dad?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Just a man asking a question. "Howell Barlow told you to do this?" Caleb was shaking now, tears welling in his eyes. He was crumbling. "Not us," he told Sterling. "He said your daughter was the key. That if you thought she wasn't safe, you'd sell the farm. He wanted us to scare her, to make it look like she was, unstable, like she might try to hurt herself." The sheer cynical evil of it took my breath away. They weren't just trying to scare her. They were trying to build a narrative, to paint a 16-year-old girl as suicidal to gain a negotiating advantage. "Can you prove that, Caleb?" I asked softly. He hesitated, looking around wildly as if Hal Barlow himself might materialize from the perfectly trimmed hedges. He was trapped between his fear of the Barlow sand, his fear of me, of the prison sentence he was now staring down. I made the choice easier for him. "Right now, I said, you're looking at a long, long time in a place you don't want to be. But you're a minor. You were following orders. If you help us, if you tell the truth, you have a chance. You lie to protect them. And I promise you, I will bury you with this video." That was all it took. The fear of prison was greater than the fear of Sterling. He pulled out his phone, his hands trembling so badly he could barely unlock it. He scrolled through his texts and showed me the screen. It was a group chat. Sterling, Caleb, and the other 4 boys. And the messages were all there. Texts from Sterling sent an hour before the attack. "Dad says it's on the oak tree. Make it look convincing. She needs to be scared off for good." And another one, "Get the rope from the garage. I'll bring Thedes." It was a direct, explicit order referencing his father. It was the smoking gun. "I need you to send those to home," I said, "and to your parents. And then you're going to talk to the sheriff." He nodded, his face a mess, all of tears and terror. He forwarded the entire message chain to a number I gave him. In Sterling Meadows, my bars jumped to full. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I had it, the unbreakable chain. From Hal Barlow to his son to the boys at the tree. It was a conspiracy planned and executed with the goal of terrorizing a child to steal her home. I looked at Caleb, this pathetic, broken kid. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel anger. I felt nothing. He was just a tool, and he'd just given me everything I needed to dismantle the man who had used him. "Go inside, Caleb," I said, my voice flat. "Talk to your father. Tell him everything. It's your only way out of this." I walked away, leaving him standing there in the twilight, a ghost on his own perfect lawn. The first crack in the dam had appeared, and I was about to turn it into a flood. The official response from the Barlows was as predictable as it was disgusting. By the time the sheriff's deputy, a young guy named Miller, arrived at my house, the HOA's spin machine was already in high gear. Hal Barlow had lawyered up not just for himself, but for Sterling and all the other boys involved. A statement was released to the small local news station. It was a masterpiece of corporate non-apology. They called it a regrettable incident of high school hazing that went tragically airy. They talked about intense school rivalries and youthful misjudgment. They were trying to frame it as a stupid prank between teenagers, a football team stunt that got out of hand. They were trying to shrink the crime to make it small and understandable, and most importantly, not something that a wealthy developer would ever orchestrate. Deputy Miller sat at my kitchen table looking tired. He was a local boy. He knew my family. He knew the Barlows, and he knew the history of the land dispute. I laid it all out for him. I played the trail cam video. I showed him the pictures of June's neck and wrists. I handed him the bag with the rope and the zip ties. Miller read the time off his body cam and sealed it. Case number, date, my signature. He logged the SD card, rope, ties, and photo set into evidence. No gaps, no games. And then I showed him the text messages from Caleb's phone. He read them, his expression hardening. He scrolled through them twice, then looked up at me. "Hazing," he said, shaking his head. "This isn't hazing. This is a felony. Several felonies." He let out a long breath. "The problem, Don, is how we're dealing with. Hal Barlow basically owns the county commissioner. He's got the best lawyers money can buy. They're going to tie this up in court for years. They'll say the texts are fake. They'll say Sterling was just bragging. They'll paint June as a troubled kid. They will drag your family through the mud." He was right. Barlow's strategy was to use his power and influence to create doubt, to muddy the waters until no one was sure what the truth was anymore. He would try to crush us with legal fees and public humiliation, but I had an advantage Barlow hadn't counted on. I had neighbors, real neighbors. Just as Miller was speaking, there was a knock on the door. It was my next-door neighbor, Dr. Evans. She was an ER doctor at the county hospital, a sharp, non-nonsense woman who had moved out here for the same reason I stayed, the peace and quiet. I had called her right after I got June back to the house, just to have her check June out professionally. She had come over, examined June, and left in a state of quiet fury. Now she was back and she was holding a file. "Deputy," she said, nodding at Miller, "I heard the Barlows are calling this hazing." She opened the file on the table. It was an official medical report. "I'm an emergency room physician. I've treated dozens of victims of assault, strangulation, and hanging attempts. What happened to June Marov was not hazing. These," she said, pointing to the photos I had taken, which she had included in her report, "are classic ligature marks consistent with attempted strangulation by hanging. The petechial hemorrhaging in her eyes, the bruising patterns, the small throat injuries and burst eye spots. Textbook strangling. Diagnosis reads, attempted homicide by ligature strangulation. I am prepared to testify under oath that what was done to this child was from a medical standpoint attempted murder. And any competent prosecutor will see it the same way." Miller looked at the report, then at Dr. Evans, then at me. A slow smile spread across his face. "Well, ma'am," he said, "that certainly clarifies things." Dr. Evans wasn't just a neighbor. She was an expert witness, a credible, unimpeachable professional who could tear the hazing defense to shreds in a courtroom. Barlow's lawyers could try to discredit me. They could try to discredit June. But discrediting an experienced ER doctor who was testifying to physical medical fact, that was a much harder task. The tide was starting to turn. The official story from on high was being challenged by the facts on the ground. Miller's phone rang. It was the sheriff. Miller listened for a moment, his eyes widening slightly. "Yes, sir," he said. "Yes, I understand." He hung up and looked at me. "That was the sheriff. He just got a call from Judge Albright." Judge Albright was another neighbor, a retired circuit court judge who lived on the other side of Finley's ranch. Apparently, Miller said, Finley rode over and told the judge what he saw. The judge is displeased. He told the sheriff that if he doesn't see a thorough and aggressive investigation into this, he's going to make some calls to the state attorney general's office. He used the words criminal conspiracy and racketeering. The community was closing ranks. Not the manicured artificial community of Sterling Meadows, bound together by HO rules and property values, but the real community. The ranchers, the doctors, the old-timers who had been here for generations. They knew right from wrong, and they knew a land grab when they saw one. Hal Barlow thought his power came from money and connections in the county seat. He had forgotten about the power of the people who actually lived on the land he was trying to steal. They were my allies, and they were not going to let this go. Miller stood up. His demeanor changed. He wasn't just a tired deputy anymore. He was a man with a purpose and with powerful allies. "Don, I'm going to go have a talk with the Barlows," he said, "and I'm going to get a warrant for that kid's phone. We're going to get that video." He paused at the door. "You did good, Don. You and your daughter. You stay strong." After he left, the house was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. It wasn't the silence of fear. It was the calm before the storm. The Barlows had spun their story, but we had the truth. We had the evidence. We had expert testimony. And we had a community that was waking up. The board was bigger than I thought. The fight was no longer just me against them. It was us. And I was starting to think that how Barlow had severely, catastrophically underestimated just how many of us there were. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place the next day. Deputy Miller had gotten the warrant for Sterling's phone, but just as it predicted, the phone had been lost. A convenient accident. They knew the video was damning, so they got rid of it. But they were amateurs. They forgot that the other boys had phones, too. And after a little pressure from their parents, who were now staring down the barrel of their sons being charged as accessories to attempted murder, the other phones started to appear. They all had videos of the incident. But more importantly, they had the full unedited group chat history. The text from Sterling were there, but so were earlier messages. Messages that laid out the real motive with chilling clarity. Miller brought his laptop over that evening. He didn't have to, but he did. "Thought you should see this," he said, his face grim. He pulled up a series of documents on his screen. The first was a set of architectural plans, the official submission for Phase 2 of the Sterling Meadows development. It showed a new road connecting the proposed subdivision to the main highway. The road cut directly across the northern edge of my property, right where the old oak tree stood. Then he pulled up another document. It was an internal HOA memo leaked to him by a board member who had finally grown a conscience. The memo detailed the HOA's repeated failed attempts to purchase an easement from me for that exact strip of land. It quoted my refusal. It estimated that my refusal to sell was costing the developer Hal Barlow Shell LLC upwards of $2 million due to the cost of rerouting the road around my property. The memo was dated 2 weeks before the attack on June. He was getting desperate, Miller said, pointing at the screen. The construction loans were contingent on that access road. Without it, the whole project could fall apart. He had to have your land. The final document was the one that made my blood run cold. It was a map overlay. One layer was the architectural plan for the road. The other layer was a map showing the known cellular dead zones, and more importantly, the blind spots of all the security cameras in the Sterling Meadows development. HOA Barlow had cameras everywhere watching his perfect little kingdom. The overlay showed that the old oak tree, the spot where they had assaulted my daughter, was in Theo's perfect blind spot. It was invisible to his cameras, and it was in a cell phone dead zone. It was the perfect place to commit a crime and believe you could get away with it. It was all there. The motive wasn't just greed. It was desperation. The attack wasn't just a random act of cruelty. It was a calculated business decision. HOA Barlow had weighed the potential $2 million loss against the risk of getting caught terrorizing a 16-year-old girl, and he had rolled the dice. He had tried to create a situation, a faked suicide attempt by a troubled teen that would either force me to sell out of fear for my daughter's safety, or in the darkest possible interpretation, remove June as an heir to the property altogether, making a future sale to him that much easier. He wasn't just a bully, he was a monster, hiding behind a nice neighborhood mask. The group chat messages from Sterling's friends confirmed it. There were texts from Sterling from the week before talking about how his dad was freaking out about the Marov problem and how they needed a permanent solution. He had promised the other boys that his dad would take care of them if they helped him solve the problem. It was all there in black and white, a conspiracy motivated by millions of dollars to terrorize a child. "We have him," Miller said, closing the laptop. "This is enough for the DA to go for a grand jury indictment. Conspiracy, attempted murder, kidnapping, they can throw the book at him." I knew he was right. In a court of law, we would win eventually. After months, maybe years of legal battles, of appeals, of Barlow using every dirty trick his expensive lawyers could think of. He would drag my daughter through endless depositions, trying to break her on the stand. He would try to ruin us financially. We would win, but it would cost us. It would cost us our peace, our privacy, our time. And I decided in that moment that Hal Barlow wasn't going to get the satisfaction of a long, drawn-out war in a courtroom. He wanted to humiliate my daughter in public. I was going to return the favor. He deserved to have his world crumble around him. Not in the sterile quiet of a courthouse, but in front of everyone he had ever tried to impress. "When is the HOA Gola?" I asked Miller. He looked at me, a confused frown on his face. "The big annual fundraiser? It's tomorrow night at the clubhouse. Why? I need you and a few of your deputies to be there," I said unofficially at first. "Just be ready." A slow grin spread across Miller's face. He understood immediately. "Dawn," he said, "you're not thinking of doing what I think you're thinking of doing, are you?" "They tried to make a spectacle of my daughter," I said, my voice low and even. "It's only fair I return the favor. They built their whole world on a foundation of lies and intimidation. I'm just going to show everyone the truth, and I'm going to do it on their stage under their lights." The storm was coming, and I was going to make sure Hal Barlow was standing right in the center of it when the lightning struck. The Sterling Meadows clubhouse was exactly as tacky and ostentatious as I'd imagined. Glass chrome and giant soulless paintings of golf courses. The annual HOA gala was in full swing. Men in ill-fitting tuxedos and women in glittering dresses milled around, drinking cheap champagne and laughing too loudly. It was a monument to suburban vanity. At the center of it all was Hal Barlow, holding court, accepting congratulations for his community leadership. He looked relaxed, confident. He thought he had weathered the storm. He thought his lawyers and his money had made the problem go away. He was wrong. A thunderstorm was rolling in from the west. The real kind, with dark, bruised clouds and the distant rumble of thunder. It felt appropriate. I wasn't dressed for a gala. I wore jeans, my work boots, and a dark jacket. I hadn't come through the front door. A few hours earlier, I'd had a quiet conversation with the clubhouse's IT guy, a young man whose sister was in June's history class. He didn't like the Barlows. Nobody did, really. They were feared, not respected. He was more than happy to give me a backdoor password to their AV system. I was in a small control booth at the back of the ballroom looking down on the party. June was at home with Dr. Evans. She was safe. This was my job. On a small laptop, I had everything queued up. A simple video file. It started with the trail cam footage. Then it cut to the pictures of June's injuries. Then to the text messages displayed in huge, easy-to-read letters. And for the audio track, I had the recording from the helicopter's cockpit camera, which captured the sound of the engine, my call with Finley, and my ragged breathing as I ran. It was a complete package, a 5-minute story of a crime told with irrefutable evidence. The main event of the evening was a speech by Hal Barlow himself. He was going to present a giant check to a local charity, a public performance of his own generosity. He stepped up to the podium. A smug smile plastered on his face. Behind him, a massive projector screen displayed the Sterling Meadows logo. "My friends, my neighbors," he began, his voice booming through the speakers. "It is a testament to what we can build together." That was my cue. I bypassed his presentation and pushed my file to the main projector. The HOA logo vanished. In its place, the grainy time-stamped footage from my trail camera filled the screen. The ballroom fell silent. People turned from the podium to the screen, their champagne glasses frozen halfway to their lips. They saw the varsity jackets. They saw June. They saw the assault. A collective gasp went through the room. Hal Barlow stopped talking, his smile gone. He stared at the screen in horror. Sterling, standing near the front, turned white as a sheet. The audio kicked in. The sound of the helicopter, the desperate relay from Finley, my own voice tight with controlled panic. Then the video switched to the close-up photos of the rope burns on June's neck, the brutal purple marks from the zip ties. The silence in the room was now absolute, thick with shock and disgust. Finally, the text messages appeared on the screen big enough for everyone to read. "Dad says it's on the oak tree. Make it look convincing." The link was there for all to see. The conspiracy laid bare. Hal Barlow's crime was projected 10 feet high in front of his friends, his neighbors, his entire world. He finally found his voice. "This is a lie," he screamed, pointing a shaking finger at the screen. "This is fake, Dr. Evidence." But it was too late. The illusion was shattered. People were backing away from him, their faces masks of contempt. Sterling, in a panic, did the stupidest thing he could have done. He acted like the bully he was. He lunged toward the stage, trying to get to the podium, to the cables, to make it stop. I had anticipated that. I was already moving. I came out of the booth and met him at the edge of the stage. He didn't even see me coming. He threw a wild punch. He stepped inside it, deflected it easily, and put him on the floor with a simple, clean takedown. No drama, no wasted motion, just a problem neutralized. Sterling hit the floor. The ballroom doors blew open. Deputy Miller and 2 officers strode in all business. Outside, the storm broke. White flash, hard thunder. Perfect. Miller went to Sterling first, cuffed him where he lay. "Sterling Barlow, you're under arrest for kidnapping and assault." He turned to the podium. "Hal Barlow, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder. Warrants are active for the other 4 teammates. Names on the screen." Hal's mouth worked, no sound. A second deputy took his wrists. Years of image and money evaporated in 5 minutes under a projector bulb. Clean public final. I didn't stay for applause. I walked out into the rain. My part was done. Justice in the end is timing and proof. Weeks later, it was everywhere. The charges stuck. The trail cam video, the texts, Caleb's statement, airtight. Hal's high-priced lawyers filed motions and press quotes. None of it mattered. The other 4 boys were charged too. One day of team pride had turned into a row of court dates. Sterling Meadows cracked. Board members quit. A new board came in. People who wanted a neighborhood, not a FFT. Phase 2 died on a memo. The road across our ridge went with it. The land grab was over. Our farm stayed ours. Courts moved slow like they do. We let them. The community didn't. Neighbors spoke up. The old rancher told his story. The ER doctor told hers. The sheriff did his job. Truth held. But our ending didn't happen in a courtroom. It came on a quiet Saturday 1 month out. I climbed the oak and took down the little trail cam. Its work was finished. In its place, I bolted up a bigger, brighter camera. No secret this time. We're still watching. I brought something else, too. A small brass bell, ship-style, clear tone. I hung it from the same low branch they had used for the rope and tied a braided cord to the clapper. June stood under the limb. The bruises were gone. The rope burn had faded to a thin white mark. Her eyes were steady, not broken, tempered. She took the cord, gave me that small, stubborn smile. Then she pulled. The bell rang out bright and clean across the valley. Not a warning, a marker, a line in the air. We're still here. This is our home. We will protect it. The sound rolled off the hills and came back to us. It meant we were safe. It meant the valley had heard. It meant if anyone tried this again, they wouldn't be facing one family. They'd be facing all of us. I put my arm around my kid and we listened as the last note faded into the trees and the quiet came back. Not the scared kind, the good kind, the kind you earn. We stood there a while, just breathing. No speech, no toast. The oak above us, the farm below us, the bell between. When we finally walked down the ridge, the new camera's little light winked once like a nod. The past could keep its footage. The future would make its own. And if trouble ever came up that road again, well, someone would pull the cord, the valley would hear, and we'd be